Radio sHAZZBOT, Issue 03,
September 2024.
bETA Maximum Overdraft, Episode 0305, Humors and Innuendos, the Nouveau Retro Zeitgeist Errata, and Letters to the Editors.
By J. Drewster Poindexter.
The opinions expressed in these pages do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the crew chiefs and shift managers of Invisible Inc. publications, and they are intended primarily for satirical purposes only. Plus the fact that, also. Anyway, any resemblance to any public or private figure is purely coincidental. Please note, some of this was written before more recent developments. Reader discretion is advised. Gilbert and Sullivan are the names of the gentlemen who signed the paychecks at my house. Radish ears.
Florida. Man.
American nightmares walking down the streets in broad daylight, all over again.
I just think you're all in for a rude awakening when all of those fake Christians try to take away all your fake American beer and bring you back to the Prohibition era. And then they try to put your kids into their phony Bible camps. I mean, as a straight-edge skinhead and a cheap looking to pay. I might actually take to it right to it at first, but you won't.
Suckers? Don't we love our suckers? Don't we just love our suckers, folks?
Now, what was I talking about again? DJ Trump, babbling away at a J6 hostage's self-promotion benefit concert.
I never did you a better service than to stop you from doing these terrible things. 2 warped wooden stools standing in for the courtroom defendants, and a bit later. But at this gate that let thy folly in, and revealed thou's direst judgment let out, King Lear, Shakespeare.
What's wrong with him?
Oh, think nothing of it. They're putting him into a writer's reprogramming camp, upstate. They say he was pornographic.
Yeah, don't you worry about that dude. When he gets out, he'll be writing children's cautionary tales books about elephants and butts, and with no memories of our cold, dark past to speak of whatsoever.
The Washington machine.
The ruling class is a bit subjective though, isn't it? I mean, they won't rule me. That's for sure. I'm uncorruptible.
Just a few J.D. Vance jokes to help you. The time with, in a riposte of sorts. J.D. Vance came up so contrary to his raison that the cars up on blocks outside his farmhouse are all Cadillacs and Lincoln Continentals. J.D. Vance ignores his Meemaw's Better Angels and roots for Mr. Drysdale on the Beverly Hillbillies. J.D. Vance thinks that NASCAR is rigged, but that TV wrestling, in fact, always favors the little guy.
Florida. Man.
Any clown can entertain other people. The trick is to keep yourself entertained. That is the sport of kings, P.T. Bonner, overheard at a recent dictator nomination.
Well, it's really just up to the veto power of the single individual voter, isn't it? Like that 5-4 decision on the Supreme Court after the 2000 presidential elections. And maybe the so-called ex-mass Christians won't have to worry about voting anymore.
Oh, forest chumps. Our false messiah, our fearless bone spur leader. The bone spurs and stripes forever guy. Putin's useful idiot. The Trojan horse of the Hermitage Foundation. I want his job. Lead us not into translation. Holy snipes. Well, I hate to interrupt the child when he's praying, don't you know?
You know what that sounds like to me, Mr. Senator from Florida? It sounds like, wow, that guy really needs to stay off the Botox and save up to afford another vasectomy. Instead.
Oh, you're a REM fan? Well, the Space Force is still the best place to be a REM fan. And do you like balloon animals too?
Well, opinions are like a hose. Everybody knows one.
Vermont is the verb where we come from. It's more of a state of mind, really. We just like sort of Vermont. It's man versus himself up there. It's like Kramer versus Kramer.
The Washington machine.
Dad? Gotta go, kiddo. Fox News is having the Hillary trial in about 10 minutes, and gosh, oh, am I thirsty.
That 1860s Civil War rebel Confederate hero image is very seductive for certain types of broken, sleepwalking, beer as an amphetamine type of sort, who might currently be stuck in a downward shame spiral cultural loop bad movie to begin with.
Look, there goes one. Let's go talk to one now.
Well, I might not know how to finish painting a house, use smart aleck high school graduates, but I do know how enough to remake an educational system, and how to revoke a healthcare system, and how to declare anyone's but my own pornography as being against my own community standards. And so, for the sake of a very obviously godless wanker, stupid effing git's distorted mirror self-image, I call upon thee, oh so-called host of hosts, to smote and rebuke your local infidels. If you're still looking for Skeeter Jr., the third's worthless 2 cents that is, right there it is, fellow Fright fans.
Mr. Gossip's column.
Item.
Nikki Haley once said that the USA has never been a racist country, and she never heard of the Jeffersonian Compromise, the 31st Constitutional Compromise. the so-called 3/5 of a person compromise of lousy references. And she gave all of her electoral delegates to a man she called a walking toxicity. We think that she could always teach AP history classes at the high school level in the florid dust under the current governor Ron DeSantis' current guidelines, if she ever needs a new day gig or something.
What a boneheaded guffaw. There. Soaring feather rhetoric is.
I'm Mr. Gossips. I know it. You know it. And now I know you know it, because it's true.
I feel like shopping at Publix, where shopping is a left-wing paradox these days, is almost like using my hard-fought paychecks to pay for right-wing Publix era Stephanie Ziegler's brain therapy sessions. I mean her far-flung flight of fancy. Funding of certain so-called religious organizations for certain so-called counter-religious activities. Even though she as yet herself refuses to show up for them, their brain therapy sessions. While the company that her great-grandparents built for her in the Southeast seems to have originally been started and organizationally structured for the benefit of its Publix employees. Stephanie Ziegler herself is very much in the pockets of the Hermitage Foundation's Project 2024 movement. I keep thinking, don't worry man, she'll eventually get hers in some sort of divine retribution, like Baker and Falwell and Oral Roberts before her. These days it's basically, will that be paper or plastic, ma'am? Oh, I thought you meant paper or plastic. Which type of crookily invested currency will you be paying for my anti-democracy yachts with, kiddo?
I'm Mr. Gossips. I know it. You know it. And now I know you know it, because it's true. I don't care what you say about the Hall of Robot Presidents, and how Robot President Mike Pence might eventually stack up against all the other robot presidents. Or about Mr. Eisnerberg's wild ride over in shaded economics land, or the mustachioed men in the Dow Chemical Corporations, if you only had a conscience, attraction, or the Botchin-GT corporations now is the best time of our minds, exhibition over in utter bloody fabrication land, and I don't care what you think of the big Space Mountain Railroad investment lines, or about Peter Payne's Frightmares, or Uncle Gumpo's blighted teacups over in Final Fantasy Finale land, or even what you say about all of those ale-free water drafts that they used to give out for free at Sniffles Country USA, way back in the head cold days of the 1870s. But if you have one negative thing to say about the Cheese Factory Robinson's Cheese House, then you are not my animated cartoon pal right now, Vivo Convivial. And I mean it.
I'm Mr. Gossips. I know it. You know it. And now I know you know it, because it's true. Seriously, they just didn't know any better back then. And it's quite a comic's leap of faith from the way back then to the so-called presentism concepts that you would have us believe in today. And that might just grow to be incredibly dated and fossilized again someday, and by the looks of it, maybe even again next week, by the way that things cooking up, by the way. Vote Kamala, Kamala Mania. Brand new Kamala Camelot. Or don't vote at all. You can't complain if you don't vote. You won't be allowed to anymore. Etc. It's just such a cliche to hear you kiddies say that things weren't at least a little more goofily hopeful, and maybe a little more innocently naive and coherent and cute back in the days. Before the real housewives of the Moscow Moose Club were setting the table for the pauper's banquet that they are trying to make be the only option available to us nowadays, youngsters, and kids of all ages. And we did not come this far in such a short epochal geological period of time, just to be stopped and turned back on the path to all of our enlightenment, teenagers. My grandfather's brother was not in the first 10 minutes of Saving Private Ryan to live to see this happen. And anyway, maybe your culture wouldn't be such a hoot without the previous 60 or 73 generations of coolio hipsters to start it off on the right road to begin with. Okay, Jetta. You can't handle the truth about the house the mouse built without us. Zippity zoozah. Zippity zah, indeed.
I'm Mr. Gossips. I know it. You know it. And now I know you know it, because it's true.
Psychology Tuesdays. All you care to eat.
It's like H.G. Wells' Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. The album version, Adolescence, was only ever supposed to be treated as a minor neurosis. Really, Sigmund Freud, sweet dreams are made of this.
Have you ever read Little, Robert Baron Gump's kiddie tell-all book? I mean, I think somebody ought to check that kid's forehead for an area code, and perhaps a return address. But that's a thanks for the heads up story for a different time. Possibly. Well, he's no Sacha Baron Cohen. But sheesh. It seems like basically anyone who's ever worked for this, Meet the Clumps, dude, any capacity whatsoever has written, tell one of these negative review tell all books of one kind or another.
Even little Robert Baron Gump, whose book most likely has the little bears with the umbrellas foreclosing on the American dream in it. and who probably got paid off not to write such a book in the early years. Just wait until after the Moonshine State's coast is toast. Or even the Yard people who last term took a scorched earth policy to the Rose Garden, burning its centuries-old treasures to the ground, led by the treachery of the wicked Malarkey, who's still here illegally on a genius immigrant grant, paid to do a special job in the US that no one else seems qualified to do. Read on. Using her evil former Soviet Union gardening techniques under Chernobyl's wrathful shadow to permanently warp even Jackie O's favorite hiding place.
But that presidential library that everybody always gets when they retire from the presidential office probably won't contain any of these hundreds and hundreds of tell-all books about tell-all books. Upon further reflection, Trump's presidential library will all just be hotel cocktail napkins with their names of hookers written on them in unofficial red state hooker red lipstick. And why do you think he goes on all those speaking tours into all those faraway towns with all that campaign money for him in the first place? To contribute tax-deductible local infrastructure bill donations or something. I guess he's not much of a reader at those eyes wide shut parties in the Lincoln bedroom that he always used to host during that last term either. Just keeping honest people honest. My fellow trick-or-treaters.
The Florida does.
Aesop talks to the kids.
You guys don't want to hear back what it was like back in the day before the car phone 15s, do you?
It was soon decided that the in no way overqualified governor of the Floridas, one Ronnie St. Diablo. Dude, he went to Dunedin. Dude, I went to Dunedin. Really, there's no way you can get into Yale Law School from Dunedin unless someone bribes your way in for you and your humble origins. Like in a long-term corruption scandal or something. Well, maybe he tested well on a corrupt government official aptitude test. Like from the future or something.
Ronnie, who seemed only qualified to make up of the best, not a people person, Ronnie St. Diablo version of himself that he could. Leveraging evil legislation with his twisted, big corporate, big money interests, and very little else even remotely connected with the legal letter of the law legit.
You guys don't want to hear back what life was like back in the day before they took away the ether webs, do you?
Ronnie St. Diablo was determined to close down every local community theatre and every arts venue and as many local regional productions of Henry Miller's The Crucible that he could get his terminally shy, not a people person, but he obviously knows where the skeletons in the refrigerator are buried anyway. Boyishly uneven, sly ghostly Undertaker's delivery truck, hands into or onto.
And with his crazy or corrupt or just plain kooky supporters, bleaching their cookies and cheering him on and on and on. Ronnie St. Diablo was in the deep pockets of the big dentistry, in the toothy grins of the big sugar, and in the swamplands of the big pharmacy industries, too. Always shilling and schmoozing for the next big sellout deal to line the pockets of his evil, greedy, clandestine corporate supporters, and all in the name of the mega churches and mega shareholders who had moved your dad's job to South Korea. And with no sign of the public welfare or its better angels in sight.
You kids don't want to hear back what it was like back in the days before they declared that political humor is pornography, do you?
Well, maybe Ronnie St. Diablo had tested well on a middle school corrupt government official aptitude test. Like from the future or something. Until one day...
No business left. Show business. Random facts.
Full disclosure time, the HSN edition.
Yet another shopping network story. So here goes. Well, here's 3 things that you're never supposed to do in a call center environment, just so that you'll know. And this goes back to even before they had the heavy surveillance that they use these days.
Facts.
I hooked up the burgeoning stand-up comedian 13-year-old smart Alecky schoolboys with the opportunity to speak to the show host. A strict no. I took down the number of a caller in Arizona with my girlfriend's same last name so that my girlfriend could call her from Florida. This behavior was right out. Even back in those days.
Fact.
I told a gal with a thick Brooklyn accent that she was stupid and hopefully change the career trajectory of her life in doing so. Lucy, a future Rosie Perez, the October Girl, New York edition, just because she thought that ordering something from Home Shopping Network was like ordering a pizza or something, and that if it wasn't hot and delicious and there within a half an hour, that it would be free. And this behavior was also negatively reinforced.
Fact.
Any one of these 3 incidents would probably get you fired or at least written up at a call center today, and you'd even risk getting lousy Yelp reviews as well. But again, they were unable to trace these incidents back to me yet. It's all right. We were better off, but were we happier as a culture? Well, the answer isn't probably not. If you can afford to do it, then make the leap to an independent newspaper vendor position today. Be a dopamine dealer at your local college campus. The job you save may be your own.
Facts.
And as we tell ourselves in the mirror in the bathroom, you're beautiful, babe. Don't ever shade. I love all that middle school jazz magazine humor stuff. You're the toppermost of the poppermost. Don't ever shade. Sensational. And what's that you're saying? I refuse to hear you do. because you refuse to hear you do. But maybe it's just a bit of romantic poetry from the brutish literature t-shirt cannons again.
Psychology, kids today.
A Harvey's magazine book excerpt.
Oh really? No. Oh wrongly, I exclaimed. And with Pop in his garters and Mom in her sash, we would just lay ourselves down for a long winter's nap, or around the holidays, as Saint Nick used to say. He used to talk in his sleep, and believe me, he was no saint. Well, they're just one big gimme 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 for the rich these days, aren't they? And one big snow globe public supermarket commercial, ROP off to everyone else who's stupid to understand. And then he'd wake up suddenly and say yuck, too much eggnog. And then he'd retch up and then go back to sleep, or some nights the Easter Bunny would stop over, and they'd stay up all night, and exchange left-handed compliments about each other's fan bases. And of course he used to refuse to go into the more economically disadvantaged neighborhoods for Halloweens too.
Mrs. Santa Claus, killing Santa.
Random day, double house. Same to you, Buddy Press International. Copyright 2024. King Thump Edition.
Religions and theocracy.
Oh, they have a good crowd in at the Faux Nerds Network nowadays. They have Brian Kilme, so at least his name smacks of honesty. They have Laura Ingrate. Well, at least she looks like she'd be good in a canoe paddle battle to the death match. She looks like her soul's been hit with an ugly stick already, although she's probably want a piece of the book deal after the canoe paddle battle to the death match eventually did get out of her control. And Greg Gutfield, is he still on? The former ratings king, the pagan saint of late night hilarity. Your neighbor's dog would watch anything after the old man falls asleep, wouldn't he? Greg looks like he never lost his old man baby fat. So it's all stretch the untruths Armstrongs with this grudge-felt dude. And all of this in a world without a William Rated F. Buckley to make us laugh out loud at the reptilian party's self-inflicted foibles and half of our nation's unfortunate Carter calamities these days. Or even a George Will, for that old-timey Ken Burns baseball perspective. And that's a Ken Burns sideburn, even though we love his work, of course. For if I am an honest puck, how can a puck survive?
Psychology Tuesdays. All you care to eat. It looks like the end of Guy Ritchie's Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels in here. Bodies and carnage lying everywhere, and the one guy's like, I think we're in the clear now, fellas. From an actual conversation, or is it just wishful thinking?
White House Examiner.
There's a fair bit of blondish astroturf atop your head, Mr. Ex-President, and it looks like a well-quaffed mop, or maybe a dead Wolverine to us, and we'd like to examine it for vital signs.
The Donald.
Oh, you mean the outer space symbiont? Ah, he's okay. He won't eat much. But incidentally, please get this thing off of me. Whoever heard of an 80-year-old real-world president of anything? But, just between you and me and the rest of the free world, I'm just trying to look like I work here, okay? My friends put me up to all of this, really. Oops, I gotta feed the outer space symbiont again.
White House Examiner.
Yeah, everything seems status quote-unquote copacetic in here to me. 7 more years and 20 more years to go. Look at me. I'm Roosevelt Franklin.
History lessons observed.
Meanwhile, at that one quiet guy in the back of the room can't change history theory of history, where one individual can't really change everything in the modern mass culture that came before it, especially not in the last 10 years. And let's, for once, ignore the obvious. Colin Kaepernick took a knee for the team and later dated that other Super Bowl Taylor Tomlinson, George. Don't know what to do. Now Pink has turned to Husker Du. Floyd made the US media circus realize that you can't really talk when you are choking. Now cardiac arrest, however.
Sinead O'Connor, who I guess preferred to wear sackcloths instead, threw her career under the bus for all the right smart girl reasons. And Harvey Weinstein, and not his guilt-free brother Max, threw his career and all his millions under the bus just for a cuddle and a peck on the cheek.
But I guess the one-man theory of history has truly met its blustery machismo dullard match during the last 10 years, with Malachia's scorched earth rose garden burned to the ground policy enabler, and in Robert Barron's apocalyptic meal ticket himself, that once and future spy, magazine poster boy, the Donald Drunks himself. So it's no incentive check, please, no more kings, and checkmate and casket castle for the good old academic one-man theory of history. Sociology buffs. Maybe now we can go back to being ordinary, old-school, quasi-crypto-klepto-Republicans once again. Just kidding. Hi, Mom.
Letters to the editor.
Yes, sirs and madmans. This country was founded by career-minded dualists who were reading Locke and Rousseau, and Descartes, Aristotle and Plato, and Newton. When they wrote the Articles of Confederation and the US Constitution, and when Jefferson wrote Declaration of Independence, they were all deists and thinkers of the then current European Enlightenment. and Jefferson was willing to accept that there might be two sides to every story when he wrote out the Declaration of Independence document. And he was willing to believe that there might be two sides to every story when he wrote all of those letters to Alexander Hamilton as well. They only put all of that God stuff in the historic writings back in the day to appease the presumed Arthur Miller, the Crucible, and Ichabod Crane, Sleepy Hollow, preacher, and schoolteacher types, who might not have signed and ratified the founding fathers' documents if all of that God stuff hadn't gotten a brief mention in their version of the nation story from its beginning. But all obligatory classic literature references aside, I support the evolution as much as anybody does, I suppose. But can you get a message through to the outside world, outside of the florid dust? Can you tell my cousins in Philadelphia that I love them, especially you, Mary Lee? And can you tell your dog that I love her too? I was just in the middle of cleaning out the garage. Really? When I called, heard the phone ring, and you called.
Atticus Lurch, 1313. To Kill a Mockingbird Lane. The florid dust.
Editor's Redux. Dear Atticus Lurch.
A blindfolded monkey throwing darts at a dartboard during a Category 6 hurricane could do a better job with the economic forecasting than this nasty Pelosi dude and his ilk can do. Women will only respect you if you have mad skills about things. You know it, I know it, Napoleon Dynamite knew it, and the American people know it. Good luck with cleaning out the garage, Atticus Lurch. And can you do something about cleaning out the future Republican cabinets afterwards? Thanks again for reading.
Letters to the editors. Trump equals what?
Dear Peter Close.
I don't know if you kids have ever lived in a prison camp or in a Kafkaesque penal colony type of an environment before, but I'm afraid that that's what we're really talking about here, gang. When we talk about Project 2025 and the Hermitage Foundation's mandate for fascism, well, at least you might still get to write long, boring Russian prison novels about how miserable everything is, but you can forget all about having them published.
And I mean a very small percent of a small percent of the so-called elite people might really take right to living conditions imposed on other people like this. And right away, too. More for me mentality type negotiations. But it would really be better if you didn't know the first thing about these type of intolerable conditions, my fellow concerned citizen. Because the truth is that these Disney-type phony Christmas sorts aren't going to be getting very chummy with you once they have secured your vote forever. And you can't use it to vote them out of office anymore, for all time, forever. And you can also forget all about those Irish whiskey rampage romanticized revenge parties if you should fall from grace with Jaw, or even just for waiting for her. Once they consider the Pokes to be their idea of pornography, I guess you're on your own for good, all alone, kids. And there will already be a closed monopoly game on all those getting out of federal prison free cards for violating the local sodomy and the lash laws too, rebel rousers.
With that fourth wife twice removed of yours that you've had your red, bloodshot, dilated, corpulent, corpuscled eyeballs fixated on in a 1,000-yard frat party stare ever so recently, well, you can forget all about that in her too. I mean, personally and professionally, I don't care where, who, or with you play hide-and-go sausage, Hector, or with what major or minor gods or goddesses or minor deities that you happen to believe in and would want to say your wedding vows to, too.
But these reptilians are wanting to put the country into a shotgun wedding with this Project 2025 document and its mandate for fascism and its phony Hermitage Foundation John Bleach society type of a prison lockdown. North Korea for sissy-style government. It's all been building up to this shite for 60 years with the publication of an obscure book by writer R.J. Rushdoony and the development of the Christmas rite in America, with Rushdoony's far-fetched idea of dominionism and his own vision of one version, of a God's self-elected children having dominion and a tight leash rule over the birds of the air and the fish of the sea, and all of those that creepeth upon the earth. And that means you and me, Skippy.
Yours, unanimous, Bob, the Deep South.
Editor's reply.
But you know what their riffraff anti-Pope's secret formula for success is? He neither drinks nor does psychedelic drugs. But we suppose that pent-up demonic Faustian chaos energy has to come out in some form or another, doesn't it? Hence, a weekend Bible salesman is born. The rivulets. The rivulets. You made our brains work, you stupid jerk.
Letter to the editors.
Dear scribblers.
Unless you work at the so-called conservative, so-called Christmas, so-called news satire, so-called website, the Babylon Bleep, then I'm not legally required to make fun of you. Okay, so here goes. House tricks in Jupiter, Florida, skeeters. Well, you gotta keep the coconuts from falling on your own heads anyway, right?
Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago when the toilet paper cost more than the money itself? Not implying anything about your writing itself. Here, of course, oops, all Philistines. It's just don't look up. strictly off the record shots, but I think those ICBMs that you're inviting will bring all kinds of new and exciting career opportunities to the Florey work environment. Yeah, Junior squared. It says on your wiki site that you have over 24 writers working for you throughout the US server. But isn't it kind of like throwing out the biblical babies with the biblical bathtub waters?
Not to harsh your the great unseen illusions or anything, but I mean as long as he really was some 7-foot-tall white dude from Kansas or Missouri State, and not a brown or black man on the road to Golgotha in the Middle East, some 2,000 or so some odd years ago, as was typical of people of that time and in that the same era, and that he wasn't, you know, fooling around with John the Evangelical, like it says he was, and that he wasn't probably dying from some kind of malnutrition anyway, as was typical of people of that time and in that same era. I mean, I'm a progressive Christian, so I'm okay with all of this stuff, really. Then at the very least, he was at the very least the ultimate Nepo baby of all time. So that's a win on your side, fellas, and I'm sure that your ilk can find that all very relatable. Instead, please cancel my subscription to your version of the resurrection. Your only friend is the N. 5 in 10 and 10 to 5. Look left, look right. No one reading your stuff can even stay awake. Anyway, you keep making them and we'll keep eating them.
Signed, your publishers.
It turns out that it is easier for a camel to get into heaven than for a rich man to get into the Eye of Fatima. Just for your information kind of stuff. Really.
Dear, your publishers.
You've got the wrong magazine here, dude. But best of luck in your future publishing assignments and endeavors. Hey, maybe you should submit something to the Babylon Bleep. They do seem a little needy nowadays, don't they?
Letters to the editors.
Do you serve breadsticks in here, Tavern Keeper? Sure, buddy, we serve anybody. Just sit yourself on down, Buster.
Dear Peter Quills.
Hi, it's me again, the previous letter writer. I just had a few more details to clear up. I hope you don't mind, gosh. I'd hate to inconvenience anyone or anything.
Yours.
Unanimous Bob, the Deep South.
Editor's Redux.
Nope, no problem, Unanimous Bob. We still have some pixels to fill up here anyway. Go right ahead. And so anyway, then I got kicked out of Bikini Kill, and it was like goodbye to all of those Hello Kitty endorsements.
Dear Peter Quills. Thanks.
And anyway, that cute little ugly baby 16-week-old is just going to reincarnate across the street in 2 years again anyway. There are other forms of religious fanaticism, you know. And anyway, you should never keep a college girl waiting, Dave. Ain't that America? Land of the free and home of the brave and little pink terracotta house for you and me. Well, as long as you can afford to live in them anyway. I think some of you unhappy campers are still just pissed off about Ronald religious fanatics and his voodoo hoodoo trickle-down economics that left you type dudes out of the loop over 40 years ago. Moral majority. Moral majority. You kids don't know what you're supporting. Try the Union Jack on for size next time first, Steve. And look for the Union label first next time while you're at it too. It has the much cooler stars and bars than the other no alternative.
Unanimous Bob, the Deep South.
Editor's reply.
We have good news and bad news, Unanimous Bob. First, we're sure it's not chlamydia, so that's the good news. You just seem like a guy who doesn't choose to use the bottom plug on every wall socket every time, good buddy. So again, you can always teach AP Home Economics classes in Florida in our book. For something to spring forward, fall back on anyway. You have our vote, Unanimous Bob.
Letters to the editor.
Okay, so I've been watching this presidential elections thing and its upcoming cultural wars fallout thing. Like I'm a bookie at the Hialeah racetracks with, a presidential racing form, and I've been running the odds for the daily trifectas and the weekly parimutuel wagering. And so far, I'm thinking maybe if they flip the ticket to a Harris Biden, or this just in, or to a Harris Newsom ticket. And I'm thinking that such a switchover might, give the country just exactly the right 3 or 4 points in the point spread polling that might be needed to win such a racetrack forms competition. I mean, I'm like a 20-year-old Bernie Sanders bro, and I think that, Stephen Colbert has an army in the same way that, Bernie Sanders had an army. But I mean, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few in Gene Roddenberry's America. Bro, you know. I just want what's right for the country and to live long and prospect enough to see the trains run on time and everything like they once said that they used to. And everything. And I know that it sounds like an uphill battle and everything, but I mean like, personally, I'm really just still hoping to occupy Wall Street and all that kind of freedom and democracy type stuff. You're very truly the management.
Editor's reply.
Well, the management. There's content and there's context. This simple fact was enough to get the Steve Urkel, the president of Harvard, fired almost overnight. And she was supposed to be the world's foremost leading authority on everything. It just goes to show you there's content and there's context. Now knock off that singing and finish your homework. Plus, don't you have a secret underground physics homework study cell group to go to in 15 minutes anyway, Tiger?
Oh, there are video games that are even more unreal and unrealistic than even real life, such as it is nowadays.
Letters to the editor.
It's dark in here. Detective, too dark.
Here, little misters. Smarty's pants stirs.
You know how cigarettes kill 10 times the number of babies that the so-called religious so-called right say would have been killed by an abortion last year? Well, you don't see anybody outlawing cigarettes, or leaving it for the states to decide anyway. Do you? I'm just keeping honest people honest here. Chemo Sabe. That's all, folks. Joe Camel, the last exit to the left, still appearing on the information superhighway signs of the US of A. P.S. No worries. That sweet little STD with the angel's face would have just reincarnated at the house down the street again in 2 years anyway. Betcha can't say the same thing about your granddad's government-sponsored black lung issues. However, can I get an ahem?
Editor's Redux.
Dear Joe Cannabis, I think that maybe you and I are becoming the kinds of angry mothers that our own angry mothers warned us about. Well, at least when they were our age anyway.
Letter to the editor.
Dear friend of foe. Or is that cloak or Claude? Do you think that's funny? Do you think that that's funny? Why do you ask? Is this a common expression these days? Does Chuckles Tarlson or Seth Rogen say that a lot on their court-ordered podcasts? But aren't you kind of paying him to decide what sounds funny to you in the first place? Don't you think that that sounds kind of, well, funny? I mean, Jay Leno got 10 years out of Monica Lewinsky jokes, just as Faux Nerds Network got 8 years out of Kyle Rittenhouse self-congratulations. So when the idea first came up that we late-night viewers might get another 4 years out of Donald Grump jokes after that first 8 years of the garbled drunks jokes, we were like, sure, sign us up, we'll just vote for our moms in protest this year instead. But this was before the Hermitage Foundation's America-ending mandate for censorship, and this product 2025 serial stalker, Mad Infesto, that came up on the US Culture's Mayday radar screens after a John Oliver whistleblowing segment. Now is the time for all true men to still bad coyotes and come to the service of their culture. Between Freddie versus Jason in this next election, I think maybe we should vote for Joe Biden and his Mitch McConnell moments. Unless a better demographic candidate can happen along immediately, if not sooner, well, not that sooner guy, but any moderate Democrat between 40 and 60 could turn this nightmare round. Don't why know. Look it up if you don't believe us, because sometimes we don't believe us either.
Chuckles Tarlson, the podcast graveyard, somewhere in a lost America. Hey, I know when I'm not on America's Most Wanted.
Editor's reply.
Reflecting back, you know, I've just always been more into the old-timey stuff instead. My grandfather died when I was 5 years old, and it was like, that guy who does the great Dom DeLucy faces from the movies isn't going to be here for dinner anymore. So, Carp Denim sees the denim, boys. It's funny how everybody has a story. You just have to look for it to find out what's behind it in the first place. We dig you, Chuckles Tarlson, but we just wouldn't know where to bury you.
Letters to the editor.
I just figured that he'd be some kind of a fourth world dictator from day one, like he said he would. You know, fight, fight, fight. Of course, me and all the other 60-year-old shareholders who sent your jobs overseas in the first place are all about that. You know, just as long as we don't have to rip our expensive trousers trying to jump over a picket fence or anything. Fight, fight, fight. Just make sure it's you and not me, with my various conditions and predispositions. I don't blame yours, really. Bone spurs and stripes forever. Lindsey Graham, crackers, making a decent living off of your tax dollars. The Washington, D.C. machines, US of FLA, PS. If he is a phony, at least he's our phony. Or else then, that means I was wrong about him. And that just isn't even possible, is it?
Editor's Redux.
Nice try, Avik Ramaswamy, but we knew it was you from the handwriting on the wall. Dude, you're all branding and no heart. We're a little tired of your nonsense. But what's the sense of anything at all when you get right down to it, actually? We fooled you. We really had you going there. Fight, fight, fight. Haha, you should have seen the look that came across your face. And do you have any famous last words for the class of 2024, Dr. Goodwill Hunter S. Tompkinson's Gazelle? Indeed I do, the in crowd. Carp denim. Seize the denim.
A letter from the editor. You gentle readers following along at home might think that with our comic book videos here at Radio SHAZZBOT, that as creator content, we're just mixing Mad Magazine-influenced AI artwork with and a Monty Python-influenced AI take on the American radio shows of the 1940s, using AI character voices. And to we here at Radio SHAZZBOT, you wouldn't be far off, really. Our only goal with this series of comic book video episodes at this point would seem to be putting our so-called cross-state rivals, the Babylon Bee, out of business as quickly and suddenly as his Humanely Possible Plus. Well, the Babylon and on Bee, being a so-called far-right-wing, so-called humor, so-called content website, would seem to be a natural predator to our secular humanist take on progressive Democrat politics, and plus the fact that they smell bad, and their mama dresses them funny. So we guess you figured out our agenda of putting them out of business fairly early on, gentle readers. As we are a fair and honest puck, subscribe early and often, and keep watching these pages. We know that you can't take your eyes off of them, of course. For more venom, vitriol, and good sports updates, and more invigorating social radar coverage than those other guys, the human boat shoes. Hated and ended.
If you've made it to the end of this comic book radio show, then you deserve to give yourself a huge round of applause and maybe some cookies and beer to be keeping up with the jokesters next door. Now go watch some cognitive psychology, true crime files, cooking programs, or someone else's family, based in TV reality, game show host bloopers reel, or imagined, or another, you've earned it. Truth believers, thanks for your ears, and remember, feedback is always welcome.
Meanwhile, 2 million people are frantically searching for running water in the Gaza Strip. Peace out.
Copyrights 2024. No CGI was harmed in the making of this comedy, radio comic book, podcast episode.